Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Andre Wynn. You've obviously already found this video, but if you're looking for more videos to come, you can find me at my YouTube channel at MMA Dre. I'm excited to bring you a series that's called MMA 101. The idea behind this series is we're going to use data analysis, science, and personal anecdotes from my experience in martial arts to analyze things that are happening both inside and outside of the cage or ring. Some of the things we're going to look at are going to include not just techniques and combinations, but we're going to look at things outside of the cage such as weight cutting, evaluating gyms and coaches, and even the business side of MMA. To be honest, I'm not going to teach you how to fight. You're not going to become a professional mixed martial artist off watching these videos, but I hope that you'll still find them educational and entertaining. Welcome to episode 1. Let's begin. Today, we're going to be taking a look at weight cutting. I know it seems sort of like a weird topic for episode 1, but I think it's really interesting, and when you start to look at the data and some of the analysis, you can actually see why some fighters cut weight, but also why it might be sort of a bad idea to be cutting that much weight, just depending on your weight class and where you're going. In a recent story, Tony Ferguson was slated to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. Unfortunately, that fight fell through, and Khabib was later replaced with Justin Gaethje. However, even more unfortunately, the fight still did not take place. But Tony Ferguson took it upon himself to still make weight. He thought for some reason it would be in his best interest to still go through with the camp and make the targeted weight of 155. He revealed that he had cut 24 pounds in 1 week to do so. Now, for those of you that maybe don't quite understand cutting weight, or you're a little bit new, you're wondering what type of weight was it that he cut? Well, I can tell you that it was definitely not fat. In order to lose 1 pound of fat, you need to burn 3,500 calories in excess of what you're already using a day. So 3,500, that times 24 would be 84,000 calories that you would need to burn to lose that much fat. Tony probably walks around anywhere between 8 to 12% body fat, so obviously he doesn't even have that much fat to lose. So what was he losing? It was all water weight. Fighters often choose to dehydrate themselves. Why? Because one, it's the quickest way to lose weight, but it's also weight that you could gain back very quickly after weigh-ins. However, there are a lot of negative side effects when you're cutting that amount of water weight. And I could tell you from my personal experience, when I was in high school, I'd lose anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds just in any given week. The reason was I would walk around anywhere from 145 to 155, and I would cut down to about 130, or when the weight classes changed, 132. And I can tell you from experience that these extreme weight cuts caused a lot of lingering health issues, and to go into detail, I'll explain some of the things that can happen to you when you're losing that much water weight. For starters, dehydration begins at a 4% loss of body weight due to water. So in Tony Ferguson's case, he probably walks around at about 180 just based off his 24-pound cut. So 4% of that would be about 7 pounds is when Tony Ferguson would start to become dehydrated. Instead, in this story, Ferguson lost an astounding 24 pounds, so that's about 13% dehydration. That's 3 times the initial onset of dehydration. When you're severely dehydrated, some of the issues that can start to occur is you'll start to feel dizzy, you're going to have a lack of energy, you're maybe not feeling as sharp, you're not as motivated, and those are just the mild symptoms. Some of the severe symptoms and severe issues are you begin to faint possibly, you can get kidney stones or permanent kidney damage, your brain actually starts to change, so depending on which part of your brain is dehydrated, it can either expand or condense, causing serious brain issues, and that makes you also easier to knock out. And then in the most extreme cases, there is of course death that can occur. So given all of these negative side effects of cutting weight, why is it that fighters still continue to lose so much weight? Some of them even cutting 30 or 40 pounds. Well, the idea is that you should get some advantage, be it height and reach or a little bit of size, maybe a little bit of strength. But when we actually look at the data and look at the trends, what we're going to see is that in some weight classes, these things that are perceived to be an advantage are not necessarily all that valuable. Before we dive into the analysis, I do want to give a brief review of bell curves. What a bell curve is it is a mapping of objects based on a certain variable. So in this case, the object is going to be fighters in different weight classes, all of the weight classes in the UFC from bantam to heavyweight. And the variable is going to be their height. And theoretically, their height should correspond with their reach as well. If you look at this curve, the hump is where most fighters will fall on average. Those heights are listed across the bottom in inches. So the shortest fighter being 64 inches tall, that's about 5'4", to the tallest fighter being about 7 feet tall, that's 84 inches. One last thing to note is that if you split the curve exactly in half, so starting right at the peak of the hump, the bottom half or the left half, that is going to be exactly 50%. So exactly half of your fighters are going to be at or below average, and the other half are going to be at or above average. To give you an example, a fighter in this particular weight class that you're seeing on screen, if they were 75 inches or 6'3", they would be above average. Whereas if there was somebody that was 69 inches tall or about 5'9", they would be extremely below average. Now, let's dive into the data. Each different colored bell curve represents a different weight class, ranging from bantamweight, which is 135, all the way to heavyweight, which has a max of 265. You'll also notice that there's some bars behind each curve. Where those bars are the height of the champion in that particular weight class. One thing that I noticed immediately is that there are only 2 weight classes in which the champion is shorter than average. Can you guess which 2 those are? If you guess the smallest ones, you're exactly right. The only 2 weight classes in which we see a champion that is shorter than average are bantamweight and featherweight. As we move on to lightweight, we see that the champion there, Khabib Nurmagomedov, is exactly average. And then every weight class above that, the champion is taller than average. This trend is actually very prominent and really interesting. My theory behind this is that as you grow, you become much stronger and your strikes and your ability to knock out somebody increase exponentially. Whereas your chin does not necessarily become more able to take a punch. Yes, a bigger guy has more neck muscles, so they're able to take maybe a little bit of a stronger punch, but it is not growing to the same extent that your strength is. Long story short, height and reach are more valuable the larger that you are. You're able to pair your strength with your reach advantage, meaning you're more likely to deliver a devastating blow or a knockout. Meanwhile, if you're in the smaller weight classes, they're just less likely to knock you out. So height and reach don't necessarily present as much as an advantage as in those larger weight classes. Instead, you can utilize your speed, technique, skill, or just game planning to help you get more victories in those smaller weight classes, bantamweight and featherweight. How can we use this analysis, and what does it tell us about cutting weight? If you are in the higher weight classes, but you're shorter than average, it might actually be more valuable for you to cut weight and maybe be at the taller end with more reach at a smaller weight class. So for instance, if you're fighting at 205, which would be light heavyweight, but you're a little bit shorter, you may want to consider cutting weight so you can get down to middleweight where you may be taller than average. And that way you can pair your strength and your size together, making you a much more dangerous fighter down at middleweight. Of course, that's assuming you can do it healthy and avoid some of the complications that we know come with dehydration. If you are in the smaller weight classes, height and reach become less of a factor, so you should really just go wherever you're most comfortable and where you could focus on technique, skill, speed, and game planning rather than trying to get a physical advantage, just because we know it's less valuable when you're around 135 all the way up to possibly even 155. Now, let's look at some real life examples. Anthony Pettis, for instance, in 2016, he decided he would try to make a cut from lightweight down to featherweight. He found some initial success in beating Charles Oliveira, but he would later fight Max Holloway and be TKO'd in the 3rd round. He then later announced that he was moving back up to lightweight. My theory is that this cut was one, way too drastic for him, and two, since he was moving down a weight class into 145 where we still see that trend that size and reach really aren't that great of an advantage, the benefits did not outweigh the negatives when it came to cutting weight. Really, the best scenario for him was to go back up to lightweight. That being said, this is all just data and analysis, and these are general trends and rules, but of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. One of those exceptions is Daniel Cormier. DC is shorter than 99% of light heavyweights and shorter than 98% of heavyweights, yet he was still able to find success in both weight classes. The reason he was able to do this was because of his superior wrestling ability. According to John Danaher, who is one of the greatest minds in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he created an entire series of ankle locks. The way he explains the concept or idea of grappling is that there is a progression to be able to defeat your opponent. And the first step in that progression of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you remove them from their feet. So you take them from their feet to the ground. The reason that you do this is you nullify their ability to use their explosive capabilities. So they're no longer able to generate as much force in their punches or kicks when they're on the ground. Daniel Cormier's ability to take down larger opponents did exactly that. He restricts their movements by putting them on the ground so that their height and reach advantages that we normally see in those upper weights is no longer that much of a factor. Now again, this is just data and these are not hard, fast rules that you need to adhere to, but you could possibly use this information to help you decide if you want to cut weight, let's say you're participating in martial arts, or if you should maybe stay where you're at. Also, this is not to tell you which fighters you should or should not like. If you happen to like a shorter fighter that's at heavyweight or light heavyweight, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll never be the champion. It just means on average or according to this trend, it's just a lot more unlikely that we see a short champion as opposed to a taller champion. Now, again, that doesn't mean short fighters are not exciting either. They're still exciting, they can still be fun to watch, and they can still pack that knockout power or that skill and technique capable of defeating these larger opponents. I hope you enjoyed this video and this topic, and hopefully you found it as exciting as I did. If you did enjoy this video, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll have much more great content coming to you. If you do have any ideas of things that you would like me to explore, go ahead, leave a comment down in the comment section. You can ask me questions, give me recommendations, whatever you'd like. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.